What's up, college football addicts? Now, recently we have learned of two bombshell pieces of news that suggest that the ACC may be quickly approaching an imminent collapse before June 30th, 2024. And we're going to break it all down for you today. Now, this information comes from a trusted source familiar with the ESPN media deal and the network side of the negotiations. This person has years of highly accurate information on conference realignment. But before we get rolling, thank you for joining us today. Happy to have you here at College Football Addiction. Now, we've been following conference realignment closely for over a year, and we know one thing for sure. It's a game of many moving parts. Those of you who have followed us over on our other channels know our track record speaks for itself. With that said, I try to be crystal clear with you. We clearly differentiate between fun speculation, fair possibilities, good possibilities, highly likely possibilities, and beyond. Today, in our opinion, we are reporting that the ACC now has a good possibility of collapsing before June 30th. I guess that's probability above 50%. So let's get rolling. The first bombshell that we have for you is that if two teams leave the ACC prior to June 30th, 2024, it triggers what is known in the contract as the composition clause. This composition clause allows ESPN to fully renegotiate the deal immediately. As you guys may remember, the ACC hastily added Stanford, Cal, and SMU during the offseason this past year in a move that made very little financial sense for the conference, because those teams were a net loss to the value of the conference. But the main reason they added those three teams was an effort to avoid the composition clause from kicking in. It was to offset Florida State, Clemson, and UNC possibly leaving. But apparently Notre Dame and the rest of the ACC miscalculated with this rush decision. But I'm hearing that if any two teams depart between FSU, Clemson, or UNC before June 30th, which would be prior to when those new teams become voting members, then it triggers complete renegotiation with ESPN. Now, this would obviously be used as leverage in negotiations because FSU and Clemson already planned to depart the ACC this offseason. It makes no difference whether they do it before or after June 30th, but it makes a huge difference for all those other ACC teams. And if this wasn't bad enough, the second bombshell is probably exponentially worse. Just to refresh, back in December of last year, it was revealed by FSU's filing that ESPN unilaterally had the ability to end the ACC media deal in 2027. Several weeks later, this fact was confirmed by both Ross Dellinger and Josh Pate. But the second bombshell is that we've now learned that ESPN has already refused to extend that ACC media deal. This means that the ACC media deal and the accompanying grant of rights will expire in June of 2027. And just to refresh, the grant of rights, per its own wording, exists only to serve the current ACC media deal and not any other media deals. So when the ACC media deal ends, so does the grant of rights. So let's talk about what all this means. But first, I know this is going to be emotionally frustrating for some of you, and you're going to race down to the comments and tell me that I'm an idiot or tell me that I'm crazy. Before you do, I'll challenge you to do this one thing. Keep an open mind through the rest of this video. Go to your team sources, whether that's 247 or On3 or wherever, and ask them to reach out to their folks they know within the room to confirm whether or not ESPN refused to extend that ACC media deal. It should not be very hard to find. If this is fake news and I'm just making it all up, your team sources or ESPN should be able to easily refute that information. Don't make the mistake of falling for ambiguous answers or thinking that them being unable to confirm means that you're in the clear. It took Dellinger and Pate weeks to confirm that this unilateral agreement even existed after FSU's filing. But remember this, if it didn't exist, there would have been an army of people coming out of the woodwork immediately, including the ACC, to correct FSU. This should be very easy to verify and refute if the ESPN deal is currently still undecided. And if it's wrong, they should be able to clearly confirm that it's wrong. So, in my opinion, silence or ambiguity or anything short of clearly refuting means that you're in pretty big trouble. Our information is coming from someone who we know has the inside information and is batting well over 90% the last couple of years. We're about to get into what this means, but first, I want to let you know tomorrow we're going to be doing a long mailbag episode about these two new bombshells. So if you have questions or thoughts, please post them below, and we'll try to answer as many as we can and be as clear as we can to update you guys. So as far as what all this means, in my opinion, it makes complete sense for the ACC to do one of two things. Option one, which I think is most likely, is to get 8 teams, a simple majority, to dissolve the conference prior to July 1st, 2024, and then have the league play together as independents in 2024 under a new one-year ESPN media deal. They play out their schedule exactly how it currently is. There's no need for rescheduling, and they split the revenue equally. It's a clean break, and every team has this 1 year to find the best possible home for them. As far as why it takes 8 teams, it's been long believed that a simple majority is all that would be required per North Carolina laws because of the type of business entity that the ACC is. And this 8-team threshold has been reported by multiple media outlets over the years. As far as why 8 teams would want to dissolve the ACC, well, first and foremost, these teams get to avoid the conference exit penalty and the grant of rights penalties. These 8 teams, and very likely a couple more, would certainly have landing spots in the BIG10 or the SEC or the BIG12, and would either make equal or more revenue by leaving the ACC. Plus, these 8 teams are already going to have to renegotiate with ESPN if Clemson, FSU, or UNC left prior to June 30th, so it would be much wiser to have the negotiations as a 1 year with FSU, Clemson, and UNC being members as opposed to a 3-year deal with 2 of the 3 being out. Option 2, which I think is less likely, is that 12 teams vote to eliminate the exit fees and all the terms on the grant of rights in the ACC conference, which prevents people from leaving as they see fit. They play their schedule out exactly as it currently is. They split revenue equally, and this would allow teams to leave as they see fit after the 2024 season. It essentially accomplishes the same thing as option 1, but without it risking having to go back to negotiations with ESPN for 24, 25, and the 26 seasons. Because it takes 12 teams to accomplish this, this seems even less likely to happen, even though it almost certainly will be in those teams' best interest. As far as the timeline, I wouldn't expect anything to drop prior to the NCAA tournament ending. Also, I suspect ACC teams are going to be deep in negotiations leading up until June 30th. The dumbest financial move that can be made at this point is fighting and letting FSU and Clemson leave prior to June 30th. Shifting the voting to greatly favor the smaller teams and being tied to the conference with exit fees. The bottom line is this. I've spent over the last year arguing that it made good financial sense for 8 teams to dissolve the ACC, even prior to this news, because the logic was always sound. It made sense for 8 teams in 2023, and it makes sense for those 8 teams in 2024. But after these 2 new bombshells, I think it pushes things even further in that direction. And like I said at the beginning of the video, we've probably now crossed that 51% likely threshold. Now, a quick reminder, don't forget to post your questions down below for tomorrow's mailbag. I know some of you are going to listen to half of this, and some of you are going to have listened to 3 minutes of this and rush down to the comments with your thoughts without finishing the full video or even getting to this point to hear this, but try not to do that. Try to listen and take it all in, and then give me your thoughts. What makes sense and what doesn't? You may think I'm crazy. You may think that this has no chance in hell of happening. Again, I'd say it's a little more than 50% likely. I think that we're not in a court of law. We're not beyond a shadow of a doubt. We're not at 99.9999% likely. We're not at 100%. I think it's just more reasonable than not. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your questions, and let's talk about that down below. I appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to College Football Addiction.